Alright. Hello everybody! It is Harley from the Fran Play and welcome back. Hello everybody!
Hello everybody!
Just a little bit.
Nice to meet you, everybody.
Nice to meet you everybody. I hope everyone is having a fantastic day. And we're going to continue off from where we left off yesterday. I believe we learned about you can create a grid of boxes that fills the browser with width and wraps nicely, right? We learned about this where we add inline block, right? And we add the inline block, and that means we don't have to add this. But it showed that we can make how. What, baby? You want your juice? Come here. What do you want?
This one. That's right, the pink one. I want pink one.
This?
Pink one?
Oh.
Thank you.
Alright. But we learned that we can use inline block as the display value, right? So once we do the inline block, add the width, the height, and the margin all around, then we get the same thing without having to add more to it, right? My eyebrows are getting in my way. Okay. This is about inline block layout. You can also use inline block for layouts. There are a few things to keep in mind. Inline block elements are affected by the by the vertical align property, which you probably want set to top. So inline block elements are affected by the vertical align property. Hi, welcome to the stream. Glad you can be here. I forgot to open up my notes. Let's open up notes. And we're gonna make a new one called, and we're gonna rename it to inline block, or actually block layout. If I can type. Boom. Okay. So what did it say here? Alright. Inline block elements are affected by the vertical align property, which you probably want set to top. Okay? You need to set the width of each column. So we set the width. Right? And there will be a gap between the columns if there is any white space between them in HTML. Okay, so we give both the nav and the column a display of inline block, right? And we give them both a width, so 25% of nav will be taken up inside of this div container, or the class container, and 75% for the column, and then we'll vertically align both of them to the top. And as you can see, there's a bit of white spacing between each container there, or each box. And boom, there we go. So, as it says, again, there will be a gap between the columns if there's any white space between them in HTML. So we have white spacing. Next, this is going to be a column. There's a new set of CSS properties that lets you easily make multi-column text. Have a look. So we give this div container a class of 3 column, right? Give it a padding of 1 EM, and then we're using these WebKits here. So let's look up what that is, right? We got a dash Moz. Is that a library? It's a media query. Oh, media query. So we know what it is, right? So CSS media rule, definition and usage. The @media rule is used in media queries to apply different styles for different media types devices. Okay, so we added this. I guess it's to fit a certain type of device, huh? Excuse me. Okay, so we give it a column count of 3, a column gap of 1, a column count of 3. Oh, okay, so these two media queries. Sorry. What's wrong, Grumpy Pants? Okay, so these 4 media queries are, you have to call them out. Now, I'll have to look into WebKit. If anyone knows the like the main differences between these, please let me know. Oh, I'm losing service. Okay. So anyway, so we have a 3-column container or div, right? And it has these proportions. CSS columns are very new, so you need to use the prefixes. And it doesn't work through Internet Explorer 9 or in Opera Mini. There are some more column-related properties, so click here to read more. Okay. We can always look up media rules later. I was trying to turn off the TV, but the remotes are missing. Oh no! 1 second. Where'd we go? You want your tablet? Hey, why don't you take a nap? Yes, you want to take a nap. Oh my goodness. Okay, give me a second. Okay, columns. This module serves to split up an element into multiple columns and to give further instructions about a few details. So, break the 4-column. Different keywords in the standard space. So okay, there's a lot of information, I guess. This is kind of how it looks. And we don't really have to worry about that. I'm sure we'll learn this. I guess this is just to learn the concept that we can do columns inside of containers. I keep calling the div a container, but a div is a container, a box container that contains content, right? And different types of content, like the nav, or different elements like the nav, sections. So, this is about Flexbox. The new Flexbox layout mode is poised to redefine how we do layouts in CSS. Unfortunately, the specifications has changed a lot recently, so it's implemented differently in different browsers. Still, I'd like to share a couple examples so you know what's coming up. These examples currently only work in some browsers that use the latest version. Of the standard. But Flexbox is, because I think they said this is outdated, but I think Flexbox is the new way of the internet. Let's see, is Flexbox the most commonly used? Okay, so there's different, you can use them both. Okay. There are a lot of out-of-date Flexbox resources around. If you want to learn more about Flexbox, start here to learn how to identify. Okay, we don't need to worry about that. But this is a simple layout of using Flexbox. So we have a container, or a class of container. Has a display of WebKit Flex, and then we display Flex. And then our nav has its width, and our Flex column has the flex of 1. I wonder why they give it a flex of 1. I guess when we learn about Flexbox, we're not there yet, so this is still block and inline, but this is kind of how it'd go, right? So we'll get there eventually. So we don't have to really pay attention too much to these examples. I believe some of these are outdated, but it's the concept of it is what we need to know, right? So flex, fancy layout using Flexbox. So flex allows you to have a flexible container, right, with your content, and being able to adjust it how you like. Oh, I think I clicked on that on accident. So cool. Centering using Flexbox. Vertical container, so we give it a height 300, display flex, display or WebKit flex and display flex, and align item center, justify content center. And so we give whatever content is within inside of our container is centered. Pretty cool. Next. And because CSS layout is so tricky, there are CSS frameworks out there to help make it easier. Here are a few if you want to check them out. Using a framework is only a good idea if the framework really does what you need your site to do. There are no replacement for knowing how CSS works. Okay, so here's some that we'll have to learn about, and here's the about page. What you got? And these are the authors. Well, good job on this page. And it's not like insane. Like it's a decent website, and it's not, I like these little buttons here that you can hover over, and you got like this probably takes you to the main page and continue on. So let's go back. Knowledge check. So what is the difference between a block element and an inline element? A block element starts it on its own new line, right? And an inline element stays inline. And that goes the same even if like the box is within a container, it will create a new line within the container, and that's just how the block elements work. What is the difference between an inline element and an inline block element? So inline element, I believe it just stays in line, right? Let's see. Okay, the inline element, so it's like this, right? Let's say this, like, okay, how this is a link here. It's an inline element. And then an inline block element would be like, okay, if this is within its own div, right? And let's say there was some words here, and then we had this, like, practice. Here's some practice assignments, and then we had our box, but let's say it was all written out there in I don't know how to put it. Let's read it. Go back and reread. This doesn't hurt, right? Okay, so this is inline, and then inline block. Okay, so inline will just display it where it's at, and which will be here, cheesecake, and wouldn't respect anything. And then with this inline block, we'll keep it inline and only create a new line if it needs to, if it reaches the end of the wrap. Is an H1 block or inline? Inline. Is a button block or inline? Block. Is a div, block, or inline? Block. Is a span, block, or inline? Inline. But let's double check the button. Here are some block level elements. No. Button is an inline element. Cool. Okay. So button is inline. I saved this page, right? What did I call this one? HTML block and inline elements. Right? HTML block and inline elements. Okay. And I think that's it. So we completed this one, and we'll move on to the next. Oh man, I lost a lot of frames. Okay, let me make sure everything's off of the Wi-Fi. It's because everyone's home on the 4th of July. So, okay, let me exit out of this and this. Just pause that. I ain't even trying to watch. Oh my god. Okay, lesson completed. Next lesson. Alright, now we're at the introduction to Flexbox. As you'll learn, there are many ways to move elements around on a web page. Over the years, new methods have been deployed and older things have fallen out of style. Flexbox is a relatively new way of manipulating elements in CSS, and when introduced, it was revolutionary. Because it is somewhat new as a technology, many resources put it near the end of their curriculum. But at this point, it has become the default way of positioning elements for many developers. Flexbox will be one of the most used tools in your toolbox, so why not learn it first? Okay, so let's create a new group. Oh, I did. No, I rename this one to Flexbox. Okay. Groups, notes. Oh, gotcha. No, okay, let's just delete this one. Or, whoops. Delete group. Yes, and we'll keep this one. And we'll just create a new one and call this one Flexbox. Okay, so in this lesson we're going to learn how to position elements using Flexbox, and we're going to learn about flex containers and flex items. You will learn how to create useful components and layouts that go beyond just stacking and centering items. Before we get started, Flexbox layouts can get a little complicated. In previous lessons, you learned how to inspect and debug things using your browser's developer tools. Those tools will be crucial for you in the following lessons. If something isn't behaving the way you expect, inspecting it in the developer tools should be your first step every time. So, let's Flexbox. Flexbox is a way to arrange items into rows or columns. These items will flex, grow, or shrink based on simple rules that you can define. To get started, let's look at a simple demonstration. For the exercises here, take your time to inspect the code and really understand what's going on. In fact, playing with the code yourself will make it much easier to retain this information. So, we have a main div, right? And then we have 3 other containers that are divs. So we have a class of flex container, and then we have classes of 1, 2, and 3 for each other container. If we go in here and look what we have, so .flex is supposed to be display flex, so the flex container, and this selector selects all divs inside of the .flex container. So we do .flex container div, selecting every single one, and we're going to do background peach puff, border 4 pixels solid brown, and height of 100 pixels for each of them, right? So each of them has a border, each of them has solid brown border, and each of them have a background color of peach puff. Okay, so now let's go ahead and mess with this. Let's remove these, right? And give it a flex of 1. Now look at it. Now we have 3 small containers. We'll get into exactly what's going on here soon enough, but now let's uncomment the 2 flex related CSS declarations, which is what we did by removing those tags surrounding them. Then check out the results. Comments prevent the browser from interpreting lines of code and are wrapped between specific tags. CSS uses the /* as an opening comment tag and a */ as a closing comment tag. While HTML and JavaScript have their own syntax, commented out lines of code can be re-enabled simply by removing the comment tags surrounding the code. So all 3 divs should now be arranged horizontally. If you resize the results frame with the 1x, 0.5x, and 0.25x buttons, you'll see that the divs will flex, and they will fill the available area and will each have equal width. If you add another div to the HTML inside of the flex container, it will show up alongside the others, and everything will flex to it to fit within the available area. So let's actually do this first. So that's how we fit it. So it flex to fit across the screen and maintain that 100 pixel ratio. Okay. So let's go ahead and go into the HTML. Let's add another one, right? And let's call it 4, just because. But now, oh, whoops! I'm so used to the studio code. Okay, so now when we look, it does it again. It's able to separate them, and why not add another one, right? Let's see how that goes. Oh, damn it, I did it again. So now we have 5. And it will continue going even the more I create. So now we should have 6, 7, 8, and 9 boxes. And again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 boxes, and they all flex to fit from one end to the other. Very cool. Okay, so if you add another div to the HTML, we already did that. If it's hard to see what's going on in the small embedded code pin, feel free to click the edit on code pin or fork on code pin button. This will bring the example into a full-size environment. Some of the later examples might especially benefit from doing this. So, flex containers and flex items. As you've seen, Flexbox is not just a single CSS property, but a whole toolbox of properties that you can use to put things where you need them. Some of these properties belong on the flex container, while some go on the flex items. This is a simple yet important concept. A flex container is any element that has display of flex on it. A flex item is any element that lives directly inside of a flex container. So in a container, right, as in this example, we have a whole container that has its background, padding, border, and gaps. And this gives it a display of flex. Now, when we give put items in there, give them their values or their properties, right? Properties with values, and we give this a flex of 1, and then padding. Let's look up what flex of 1 means, because I don't think I fully understand that yet. Flex 1 meaning. What does flex 1 mean? We all know the flex property is a shorthand for the flex grow, flex shrink, and the flex basis properties. Its default value is 0, 1, or auto, which means flex grow, flex shrink, flex basis, auto, right? But I've noticed in many places flex 1 is used. Is it shorthand for 1, 1 auto or 1, 0 auto? I can't understand what it means, and I get nothing when I Google. So flex 1 means the following. Flex 1 grow. The div will grow in the same proportion as the window size. Gotcha. The flex will grow in some proportion as the window size. So flex 1, right? This means the div will grow in the same proportion as the window size. Base screen size available, e.g. if 3 divs are in the wrapper. Okay. And that's and because it flex means all 3 of those, I believe. And the div will shrink. Oh, I keep calling it div. Div. The div will shrink in the same proportion as the window size. Okay. Alright, now let's see here. So flex containers and flex items. And let's actually do, what is Flexbox? It is a way to arrange items into rows or columns. They will flex with the page, grow or shrink based on rules that you define to it. Pretty cool. So flex container. Okay, we already learned about flex container. Oh no, we already read through this, right? So flex container is an element that has a flex display flex. A flex item in any element that lives directly inside of the flex container. Somewhat confusingly, any element. Welcome to the stream, everybody. That's join. Any element can be both a flex container and a flex item. Said another way, you can also put display flex on a flex item and then use Flexbox to arrange its children. So we got flex items, and this is also a flex container with flex items. Cool. Creating and nesting multiple flex containers and items is the primary way we will be building up complex layouts. The following image was achieved using only Flexbox to arrange size and place of various elements. Flexbox is a very powerful tool. Knowledge check. This section contains questions. Oh, let's put you can apply Flexbox rules to items that have content / other containers that have content. In other words, you can use Flexbox rules to define boxes within boxes to use Flex. Again, I think that's my understanding of it, but so let's see. What's the difference between Flex container and a Flex item? A Flex container is like the parent, right? And the item is within it. So the container is the parent. Items are inside. Flex container is an element that has display Flex on it, and a Flex item is any element that lives directly inside of a Flex container. A Flex container is any element that has display of Flex. Oh my god, I cannot spell on it. A Flex item is any element that lives directly inside of a Flex container. And how do you create a Flex item? That's a good one. Somewhat confusingly, any element can be both a Flex container and a Flex item. Said another way, you can also put display Flex on a Flex item and then use Flexbox to arrange its children. Okay. Okay, so how do you create a Flex item? Okay, so a Flex item is inside of a Flex container. So the Flex container, right, is the parent, and the parent has the display of Flex, and then any item inside of that Flex container also contains Flex, a value of Flex to it. So then you can rearrange it with the same properties, pretty much. Okay, let's complete that. Growing and shrinking. Let's look a little closer at what actually happened when you put Flex 1 on those Flex items in the last lesson. This course contains a general overview of topics that you will learn in this lesson. Oh, I didn't need to read that. What we'll learn this lesson is, you'll learn the 3 properties that are defined by the Flex shorthand, and how to use them individually. Okay, so let's do this. Oh, wrong thing. The Flex shorthand. And then we'll put using the value of Flex for the display property is is a shorthand version of the 3 properties of Flex. You can use these properties individually. Okay. You've seen some shorthand properties before, but we haven't officially defined them yet. So, shorthand properties are CSS properties that let you set the values to multiple other CSS properties simultaneously. Using a shorthand property, you can write more concise and often more readable style sheets, saving time and energy. So, our shorthand properties on MDN, we can always read that later, but let's open it up, right? Shorthand properties in CSS are properties that let you set the value of multiple other CSS properties simultaneously. Using a shorthand property, you can write more concise and often more readable style sheets, saving time and energy. The CSS specification defines shorthand properties to group the definition common to properties acting on the same theme. For instance, the CSS background property is a shorthand property that's able to define the values of background color, background image, background repeat. Oh, gotcha. Okay, so shorthands. Okay, so anyway, in this case, flex is actually a shorthand for flex grow, flex shrink, and flex basis. So, div flex grow. And as we defined here, flex grow, and flex shrink. Flex basis. Okay, and let's go ahead and separate these and asterisk up to the front of these. Alright. The default value of the flex property is shown on the above screenshot. Flex grow, flex shrink, flex basis. Very often you see the flex shorthand defined with only one value. In that case, the value is applied to flex grow, so when you put flex 1 on our divs, we were actually specifying flex 110%. Flex grow expects a single number as its value, and that number is used as the flex item's grow factor. When we apply flex 1 to every div inside of their container, we are telling every div to grow the same amount. The result of this is that every div ends up the exact same size. If we instead add flex 2 to just one of the divs, then that div would grow 2 times the size of its borders, or of the others. In the following example, the flex shorthand has values of flex shrink and flex basis, specified with their default values. So right here, we have the flex container has the display of flex, and then we have the flex container and all divs selected, and so we have the flex 110, and div 2 is selected here. So we select the class flex container and 2, and then flex 210%. So the second one is going to be 2 times bigger than the others. What if we add 60%? Okay. Flex shrink is similar to flex grow. I hear something. Oh well. Hi, welcome to the stream. Alright, so flex shrink. Flex shrink is similar to flex grow, but sets the shrink factor of a flex item. Flex shrink only ends up being applied if the size of all flex items is larger than the parent container. For example, if our 3 divs from above had a width declaration like width 100 pixels and .flex container was smaller than 300 pixels, our divs would have to shrink to fit. The default shrink factor is flex shrink 1, which means all items will shrink evenly. If you do not want an item to shrink when you specify flex shrink 0. Oh, then you specify flex shrink 0. Okay, hold on. These are some good notes. Okay. So flex shrink. You can also specify higher numbers to make certain items shrink at a higher rate than normal. Ooh. So, okay, so 0 does not shrink. 1 will shrink evenly. And higher numbers would make it shrink faster. So let's actually... see what happens there. And so I see, because it shrinks more. I see that. Maybe not. I can't tell the difference. Okay, so different. You can also specify higher numbers. Make sure you're high rate. Okay, here's an example. Note that we've also changed the flex spaces for reasons that will be explained shortly. If you shrink your browser window, you'll notice that 2 never gets smaller than the given width of 250 pixels, even though the flex grow rule would otherwise specify that each element should be equally sized. It is an important implication to notice here is that when you specify flex grow and flex shrink, flex items do not necessarily respect your given rules of width. In the above example, all 3 divs are given a width of 250 pixels, but when their parent is big enough, they grow to fill it. Likewise, when the parent is too small, the default behavior is for them to shrink to fit. This is not a bug, but it can be confusing behavior if you're not expecting it. Let's actually edit on CodePen real quick. It's kind of... okay, so here's this, and okay. Flex spaces for reasons we'll explain shortly. Try clicking rerun. I found flex shrink confusing to understand. Yeah, flex shrink is a little weird. Try clicking rerun. Oh, okay. Let's rerun it. Okay, so the second... so this one would always stay... oh god dang it. Scroll it please. Oh, okay, I guess I can't. Result, thank you. So, okay, so the middle one will always stay at... oh no, it keeps growing. Oh, damn it, I went up one. I meant to do this one. Or did it take me back up again? Oh no, it didn't. Okay. Okay. Let's reread that one more time. Okay. Flex shrink. Flex shrink is similar to flex grow, but sets the shrink factor of all flex item. Sets the shrink factor of a flex item. The flex shrink only ends up being applied if the size of all flex items is larger than the parent container. For example, if our 3 divs from above had a width declaration of width 100 pixels and the flex container was smaller than 300 pixels, our divs would have to shrink to fit. The default shrink factor is flex shrink 1, which means all items will shrink evenly. If you do not want an item to shrink when you can specify it, then you can specify flex shrink 0. Okay, so let's try that, right? Flex shrink 0, and that's for item 2. Okay, now I see it. Okay, I see it now. I see it stays only the 250 pixels, while the other ones can actually shrink. Pretty cool. And I think it has like the maximum width of 250 pixels. If I try to shrink it all the way down, I think that's when it... Sorry, I need a stretch. Stretch time. Also, Psychos, I hope you're having a great day. Trying to get some stream going, get some learning going. Okay, here's an example. Now that we've also changed the flex basis for reasons that we'll explain shortly, if you shrink your browser window, you'll notice that 2 never gets smaller than the given width 250 pixels, which we just saw. An important implication to notice here is that when you specify flex grow or flex shrink, flex items do not necessarily respect our given values of width. In the example above, all 3 divs are given a width 250 pixels, but when their parent is big enough, they'll grow to fit. They grow to fill it. So if it grows beyond 250 pixels, it will fit within that parent container. And will grow to fill it. Likewise, when the parent is too small, the default behavior is for them to shrink to fit. This is not a bug, but it could be confusing behavior if you aren't expecting it. Flex basis. Oh, wrong button. Yay! My percentage of frames lost is going down, thank goodness. Okay. Flex basis. Flex basis simply sets the initial size of a flex item, so any sort of flex growing or flex shrinking starts from that baseline size. The shorthand value defaults to flex basis 0%. The reason we had to change it to auto in the flex shrink example is that with the basis set to 0, those items would ignore the item's width, and everything would shrink evenly. Using auto as a flex basis tells the item to check for a width declaration with 250 pixels. Okay, so when we use auto, it declares. Okay, hold on, let me write that down. So, flex basis. I know I had the whatever up there, but who cares, right? Flex basis. When using auto for flex basis, it tells the flex item, to check for a width declaration, either within itself or in its parent. Okay. There is a difference between the default value of flex basis and the way the flex shorthand defines it. If no flex basis is given, the actual default value for flex basis is auto, which is awesome, which is what we need. But when you specify flex 1 on an element, it interprets that as flex 110. If you only want to adjust on an item's flex grow, you can simply do so directly without the shorthand. Or you can be more verbose and use a full 3 value shorthand, flex 11 auto. You could also use the predefined value flex auto, which is equivalent to flex 11 auto. Okay, so flex auto, let's write that down, that's going to be useful. Flex auto equals the same thing as flex 11 auto. Ooh. Okay. In practice, You will likely not be using complex values of flex grow, flex shrink, or flex spaces. Generally, you're most likely to use decoration like flex 1 to make divs grow evenly, and flex shrink 0 to keep certain divs from shrinking. It is possible to get fancy and set up layouts where some columns relate to each other in a specific ratio, so it's useful to know that you can use other values, but those are relatively rare. Okay, so this section, okay. What are the 3 values defined in the shorthand flex property? Flex 1 auto. So it's going to be grow, shrink, and basis. And there's no additional resources. Mark complete. Next lesson. Woo! We're getting somewhere, baby. This is so cool. I'm thinking about making an intro song to play at the beginning of every stream. I just have to record it. I made something up earlier. It's pretty cool. But who knows? Alright, axes. You'll learn about the 2 axes of a flex container. Axes or axes? You'll learn how to change those axes to arrange your content in columns instead of rows. Interesting. Okay, is it axes? Can you use it like that? Axes. Okay, hold on. What is that? No way. Okay. What are axes plural for? Axis? Axis versus axis. Axis, when pronounced with the long E, is a plural. Okay. So it's say multiple. Gotcha. Didn't know that. That's cool. I mean, I'm not dumb, but I didn't know that was... English is so weird. There's so many words. Some words. Okay, so you'll learn how to change those axes to arrange your content in columns instead of rows. So up and down instead of horizontal. The most confusing thing about Flexbox is that it can work either horizontally or vertically. And the way some rules work changes a bit depending on which direction you are working with. The default direction for a flex container is horizontal or row, but you can change the direction of the vertical or column. The direction can be specified in CSS like so: css.flexcontainer flex direction column. So we can change the direction of which way that we want to go, whether vertical or horizontal. So row would be horizontal, column would be vertical. Oh man. Okay guys, I gotta use the restroom. I know every time I cut the stream I say I gotta use the restroom. Just on a serious note, I have IBS, so I gotta go sometimes. But I will be back. I will actually start streaming again here shortly, so thank you guys for tuning in for now, and I'll be back going over some more Odin project here in just a bit. Alright, I appreciate all of you. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I hope everyone has a fantastic day.